This land is your land. This land is my land.
I became mayor at 29, but before I became mayor, I was on the city council. I was elected at 24 years old. I grew up in the second highest poverty pocket in the state. I did have the great fortune of having terrific parents and 9 brothers and sisters. But nonetheless, I came from a poor area, and I ran in a district that was pretty much an affluent area. Well, I won by knocking on doors, meeting people one at a time. I knocked on about 80,000 doors over a period of 12 months, and I met with people. Now, I ran in a nonpartisan election, so I spoke to Democrats, Republicans, and independents. They had an effect on how I thought. There's no doubt I met many good Republicans during that race who had ideas and talked about issues that were important to them and their businesses. But here's what's even more important. You cannot get people to understand poverty unless you're willing to understand commerce. You cannot get people to understand how to fix problems until you understand the importance of working together. A nonpartisan system, in my opinion, is meant to facilitate communication between all sides so that we can do those things that are important to move our society forward.
Well, let me see if I can dig a little deeper on what you're saying here. Let's talk about democracy and poverty. Let's go right at this question and let's talk about this. How, in your views, how does expanding democracy at this point in America put us in a better position to engage the issue of poverty? How do you see that both at a political level, at a moral level, and also at a practical level? How do we bring those two issues together?
One thing is, in 2005, when Michael Bloomberg ran for mayor in New York City, we worked on his campaign. He was on the Independence Party line and the Republican line. Bloomberg got 50% of the black vote. Nobody has ever gotten 50% of the black vote in New York City in the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, it was, unless they were Democrats. And so it was phenomenal. So we went to bed that night, I went to bed that night, silly me, thinking that I was going to wake up in the morning. This was going to be front page news. This is like, I could not wait. Not one media outlet, including the black paper in the city, nobody acknowledged that 50% of the black community had gone out and voted for an independent. We got the vote primarily on the Independence Party line. And so I think the reason for that is because that announcement comes hand in hand with the fact that you can step outside of your box, you can do something different, and you can reorganize yourselves in such a way in the political arena so that you have power. And the people who run this city were determined that they were not going to convey that. And then with power, you do the things that you need to impact on. People in the city currently, for this whole cold season, have been living in NYCHA housing, and there has been no heat. So that's a political issue. That has to do with people knowing that you can stand up and say, you better turn on this heat, or whoever you are in the arena that we're in, the area that we're in, we're not going to vote for you. And there are a whole host of things, to me, that would be taken on if, in fact, we continue to build people's sensibilities, involvement, emergence in the growth and importance of democracy and the relationship between democracy and voting and changing our lives. But we have to work on that because, in fact, now there isn't that relationship because the same people get elected and they do nothing. Right. They let the people freeze in these apartments in NYCHA because they're trying to freeze them out.
We need independent candidates to have the opportunity to participate in debates with the candidates to put those issues on the table. See, the incumbent Governor Pat Quinn refused to give me a debate, even though I commanded 28% of the state vote. I'm born and raised in the Henry Horner projects on the west side of Chicago, had to overcome a lot of, like everybody else, all of us had to overcome adversities in our lives, and we made good of our lives. So the thing is, we can present issues that the grassroots people are experiencing right now. and solutions based on my expertise anyway. So I think one of the solutions is making sure we have the open primaries, like you said, where we can have independence in the debating process. Poverty, immigration, we have issues with the violence, sexually transmitted diseases on the rise in the African-American community. There's so many things happening, so we need somebody that's going to represent the people sincerely. Well, and that's where independence come in at.
Well, I think also,
right.
Well, I think that we can't rely on the two-party system's debates to have our debates. I think we have to take our debates to the streets. And I think we have to organize people to participate in them, because they're never going to let us in. Right. The only way we're going to be in is that we change where in is. And it's on the streets.
And people that are, incredibly overwhelmed already with their lives. It's hard to ask them to vote and vote when they don't see anything happening when you're voting. So we've got to convince people that voting is the way to show up, and other forms of participation. We have the basic story about, a quarter of, a huge number of people that they fall out of the middle class when they have babies.
Well, but these folks have never gotten into it.
Yeah, but I'm saying that we have people entering it in a way that it's our growing population of not middle class, in poverty is a huge problem. We want to, have everybody become middle class. And, there's a huge bias against mothers in the workplace and against single mothers in particular.
Well, here's what I would tell you, at least on the poverty issue, that seems to make sense to me. I think its solution is symbiotic mutualism. It's a recognition that we're not really divided into parts. I watch what's happening in our country with the Tea Party movement, which has been mainly co-opted by the Republican Party. Their message seems to be one that says the real problem is government. That government has created the problems that we have, and that what we need to do is remove government and our problems would be fixed. On the other side, the Occupy movement, which in many parts has been co-opted by the Democratic Party, seems to say that government is not the problem, that it's the private sector, it's the corporate sector. Well, here's my answer. We've become the mightiest nation, maybe in the history of the planet, and we did so through a process that says both of them are wrong. Both of them, right? Start with government. Government played a key role in building infrastructure in our educational system and building out the ability for people to be able to participate. It passed regulations that were very important to commerce. Civil rights rules, the ability for women and minorities to be able to participate has clearly been helpful to our economy. On the other side, the private sector, they're creating products that we're shipping around the world, things like this, that are changing our quality of life. Effectively, both are important. We're all sitting in the same rather narrow rowboat together. And I get the fact that people who come from the impoverished side oftentimes look at the guy on the other end of the boat, the corporate side, and they view it as they want to see them submerge without recognizing that they're tied together. And the business side does the same thing to leaders on the poverty side. Recognizing that we're connected is our only way to survive this thing. And it's our only way to continue what has become the mightiest nation in the history of the planet.
The other thing I just want to say, the myth is that poverty is self-perpetuating, that it's personal. Even in the segregation, I don't even think that we self-segregate. I think that we've been segregated. When you look at the neighborhoods, people don't even think they can live next door to each other unless you're of some elite class. The neighborhoods are organized in that way, and that keeps people from even knowing who the other is. So people are not responsible in this country for being poor. The country, the nation has a responsibility. for doing something about poverty. I think we politically have a responsibility. I feel like I have a responsibility for doing something about poverty. And the ways in which that looks for everybody is that we have to fight against poverty. But we didn't create it. Nobody said, well, do you want to live on Fifth Avenue in New York, or would you rather live in the poorest, most rundown, inaccessible community in the city? And people say, well, I think I'll take the latter. We ended up there because of the consequences of history and the lack of political support from the people who run this city and country.
How the conference has impacted me is that I see the makings of a major independent voters movement, and I'm willing to play a role. You know what I mean? Seriously. I see it. That's the only thing I can say for right now, because I believe in movements, okay? And then I'm looking at the model in Nelson Mandela's life when you talk about the power of a person that can make a difference. I mean, so, we don't just have to go with the norm and the status quo anymore. Yeah, right. We just have to organize. And Nelson Mandela's life pretty much embodied everything I'm talking about.
The single most important thing to the movement is that it is not going to be carried off just by a single state doing what they want to do. It has to be a national effort. There has to be a national voice. There has to be a national group of people who are coming together to talk about its importance. And in that, you're always going to find differences, but you're also going to begin to find that area where we have common ground that we can move it forward.
Right now, my experience of the political process is that throwing in another candidate is sometimes really helpful, but it doesn't go to the core of our divisions. And that's where my real interest is.
My name is Philip. I'm from New York, and I'm homeless. And I take from what you said that if I sink, you sink. And if I sink, everyone here sinks. I appreciate that. I've suffered from long-term homelessness despite a college degree. And I would like to ask you and the Independent Party, this is an appeal, to make homelessness an issue for across the nation, because we're seeing increasing criminalization of homeless people. Despite the fact there's an increasing number of college-educated people and veterans among us.
Homelessness is poverty. I organize homeless people all the time. It is a very important part of what it is that we're doing. It's critical, and what I teach homeless people is that with all the pain and misery involved in how their lives are lived, they have to get out here and help to build this. That's going to make the difference.
For you.